The waitress was about to set the billionaire's coffee down when her eyes caught the old silver ring on his hand. Her face went pale. The tray shook in her grip. She stared at the ring for a long moment before quietly saying words that made the billionaire's heart stop. "Sir, my mother has a ring just like that one." The billionaire slowly glanced down at the ring he'd worn every day for 30 years. It wasn't expensive. It wasn't a family heirloom. It was one half of a matching pair he'd given to the only woman he'd ever truly loved before life pulled them apart. For the first time in decades, his hands trembled. If you believe in love, forgiveness, and second chances, please like this video. Drop a comment, share it with someone who could use some encouragement, and subscribe for more stories like this one. 56-year-old billionaire Alexander Whitmore had built one of Europe's largest engineering firms from almost nothing. Magazines praised his success, but none of them ever mentioned the quiet sadness he carried everywhere he went. 30 years earlier, long before the wealth, Alexander had fallen hard for a university student named Evelyn Harper. They had no money. They shared a cramped apartment. They dreamed of one day starting a small engineering business together. The day Alexander was offered an overseas internship that could change both their futures, he bought 2 plain silver rings from a neighborhood jeweler. He couldn't afford diamonds. So instead, he had a tiny compass engraved inside each band, along with 2 words, "Always home." He promised Evelyn that no matter where life took them, the rings would lead them back to each other. Days later, disaster struck. His flight was delayed after an earthquake disrupted international travel. Phone lines and mail systems broke down for weeks. By the time he made it back, Evelyn was gone from her apartment. Neighbors thought she'd moved. His letters came back unopened. Her number was disconnected. Alexander searched for years. Eventually, believing she'd moved on with someone else, he buried the pain in work. He never took off the ring. 30 years later, 26-year-old Claire Harper waited tables at the upscale Grand Harbor restaurant, working afternoons to help support her widowed mother. Claire had always loved her mother's old silver ring, the one she never took off. Whenever Claire asked about it, her mother just smiled and said it was a reminder that true love can survive even the longest distances. That afternoon, Alexander walked in for a business meeting. As Claire poured his coffee, the light caught the ring on his hand, and her breath caught. It looked identical to her mother's. Even the tiny compass engraving matched. Before she could stop herself, she said it out loud. "Sir, my mother has a ring just like yours." Alexander looked up sharply. His breathing changed. Almost no one had ever recognized that ring before. Keeping his voice steady, he asked where her mother had gotten it. Claire said she didn't know. Her mother had worn it for as long as she could remember. He asked one more question. "What's your mother's name?" "Evelyn Harper." The coffee cup slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. Heads turned across the restaurant. He couldn't get a word out. 30 years of unanswered questions suddenly had a name attached to them. Confused, Claire called her mother and asked her to come by after her shift. A little over an hour later, Evelyn walked through the door. Her hair had gone silver with time, but Alexander knew her instantly. She froze mid-step. The ring on his hand caught the light. She reached up and touched the matching one on her own. Neither of them moved for a long moment. Finally, Evelyn told him what had really happened all those years ago. After he left, she'd found out she was pregnant. Before she could reach him, the earthquake cut off communication. Around the same time, her father fell seriously ill in another state, and she moved to care for him, believing Alexander had taken the overseas position permanently, since every letter she sent came back undelivered because of the disaster. Years passed. Both of them assumed the other had moved on. Neither ever stopped loving the other. Neither ever took off the ring. Claire stood quietly between them, realizing the father her mother had only ever described in old memories had been standing in front of her the whole time. Alexander apologized for every year they'd lost. Evelyn admitted she'd made the same assumptions he had. Neither blamed the other. Sometimes life pulls people apart not through betrayal, but through timing, tragedy, and misunderstanding. In the months that followed, Alexander became part of Claire's life. Not by trying to make up for lost time all at once, but by patiently earning new memories, one at a time. He learned about the birthdays he'd missed, the graduation he never saw, the dreams Claire still hoped to chase. Claire realized the billionaire everyone admired from a distance was up close. Just a father grateful for an unexpected second chance. Together, the three of them started the Always Home Foundation, helping reunite families separated by natural disasters and humanitarian crises. Alexander often wore his old ring to foundation events. When people asked why a man of his wealth still wore something so simple, he'd just smile and say, "Because some promises are worth more than diamonds." Before we wrap up, we'd love to hear from you. Do you believe love can survive years apart? If both people never stop believing, leave a comment below. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. Years later, on another sunlit afternoon, Claire watched her parents laughing together as they welcomed newly reunited families through the doors of the Foundation's community center. Alexander glanced down at the old silver ring that had traveled with him through 30 years of loneliness. It had never really been a symbol of what he'd lost. It had just been quietly waiting to become a symbol of everything he eventually found again. If this story moved you, like the video, leave a comment. Share it with someone who needs a little hope today. And subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Sometimes the smallest ring carries the biggest promise. And love has a way of finding its way home.